So I hope you join me in welcoming Taylor-Carmen Savath up to the stage.
Now I want you to close your eyes for a second, and I want you to imagine wherever it is that you live, your house, your apartment, wherever it is that you spend your time. And I want you to imagine that suddenly in your house, there's an obstacle course. There are hurdles if you want to get to the bathroom, there's a ladder to get into your bed, whatever it may be, just imagine an obstacle at each step that you would do throughout the day. Everybody got it? Everybody got the map in their head? Okay, great. I'm going to ask you to hold on to that image as we go through the talk and refer back to it now and again. Now, what can we learn from this metaphor? The first thing I'm going to ask you to consider is that this is a version of what the disability experience looks like for me and for a lot of other people. It's not that there's anything that we go throughout our day that we don't do, it's just there's a different obstacle for each person in front of each activity. So you have to think about it differently. So the first thing I ask you to consider is that being a disabled person, mostly, means you're a natural innovator. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you lived in a house that had obstacles like that every day, you figured out ways around them. It's your house. You know your way around the house in the dark with the lights on. You can find your way to the bathroom, you can find your way probably even down the stairs without turning on the lights. That's what it's like to live in the house of being a disabled person. We figure it out. That's the first thing I want you to understand, is that we figure it out. We are natural innovators, and then our entire life is about figuring out how to live our life in the best possible way while getting around those obstacles. If you want a perfect example, I came here as a representative of the disabled community today and had to spend 15 minutes waiting for an elevator to get to an accessible bathroom on this campus. So there's an innovation starter for the day. Yes. Now, for a slightly more fun example, I recently got married. I tell you I got married, but A, because it fits into my next example, and B, because for some reason people think that disabled people are not people who fall in love, have sex, do all those crazy things. Guess what? Proof of the otherwise. Now, moving on to the innovator point. One of the most difficult things for me to innovate was planning a wedding. Why is that, you ask? Because when people assume that you don't fall in love, people assume that you don't get married. And when people assume that you don't get married, nobody thinks about what your wedding looks like. So the entire wedding industry is designed for able-bodied brides and grooms. Think about how you picture a wedding. You walk down an aisle, don't you? Yeah. You're walked down by your father or your mother, the long white dress. Think about the image of a wedding. None of that looks like us. But because we are naturally adaptive, I figured it out. When I wanted to walk down the aisle, and I do walk, I haven't been BSing you, it's not a miracle, it's just a thing that I do. But I require balance assistance. So how was I going to do that? Okay, well, I was going to walk with my dad anyway, right? But I require support on both sides. So what did I do? I told my mom, you're going to walk down with us too. And we went together. And it was my favorite moment of the entire day, because here I was, supported by the two other people I love most in the world, and we figured out the walk down the aisle problem. Other examples of the wedding adaptation? What do brides wear on their feet usually? Heels, right? I can barely walk on my own flat feet, much less with a heel. So what did I do about that? I went to a designer that makes reception shoes, the shoes you change into when your feet hurt, flat ones, and bought the sparkliest pair I could find. Because that's what you do. When it came to the big boy dress, I bought the dress. I bought the ball gown. I bought the bridal dress. And then I went to the salon and I had it nipped to my ankles. So I couldn't trip over it, because the one thing about having cerebral palsy is you can trip over air. All my friends at CP in the audience just laugh, because that's life. So think about that. Think about if you have to spend that much time making an adaptation for what's supposed to be the most important day of your life, how much time do we spend adapting every day? And I don't tell you that so you feel sorry for us. And I don't tell you that for any sort of pity. I tell you that because I want you to think of it as a positive. Because when people talk about disabled people not being usable in the workforce, or our lack of romantic possibilities, whatever it may be, just remember, everybody wants to be innovative, and we have no choice. The next thing I would like to say to those of you who are future social workers, occupational therapists, folks who are going to have to deal with us in general, we're the experts on ourselves, right? It can be super easy to read a bunch of information in a book and think, I know that. I was tested on that. I'm an expert on that. It's great. It's a fun thing to think because it makes you feel like you did something. I support that. I'm with you. I get it. But the thing I would say to you is, you don't live in anybody else's house. And in the same way that you wouldn't expect that you could turn off the lights in anybody else's house and find your way to the bathroom, understand that we live in the house with all the obstacles and we know where they are. So I would say, it is amazing to be an ally. And I love that you are all here and you've all taken the steps to be allies and you're all taking the steps to do the important work. Bravo to all of you. But understand that this isn't the moment for you to lead. This is the moment for you to listen. This is the moment for you to act when you're asked to act. This is the moment for you to make noise and say there are issues and we need to draw attention to those issues. But remember who the experts are. That sounded way more condescending than I meant to. My next suggestion about the obstacle course, I'm going to take you back to the obstacle course, is that it changes day to day, right? Because some days you're going to know exactly where everything is and you can find your way to the bathroom with the lights off, and some days you trip over the rug. Because that's how life is. Some days you trip over the rug, some days you forget where you're going, and you crash your knee into the coffee table. That's life. Disability is like that too. You can know your body like the back of your hand. You can be the expert, you can be familiar with it, but some days something else has a plan. Some days the weather's not great, some days transportation's not on your side, sometimes the elevators are broken, sometimes you're triggered by emotional issues, sometimes you wear yourself out too much. That's my biggest problem, is if I have too much fun, I'm useless for like a week afterwards. That's my biggest thing, is that if I work too hard or have too much fun or do pretty much too much of anything, I am of no service to anyone for at least a week afterwards. So I suggest to you that it changes day to day. It's easy to imagine any one group as static, right? Anything I say to you about disabled people are X one thing, it's easy to go, oh, they're all that one thing. But I guarantee you, somebody will come up here and contradict me today. And I'm glad. And I hope you listen to both sides and understand that both can coexist, because humans are contradictions. It's in our very nature. If you've ever read the Constitution, you know nothing exists without contradicting itself. It's a Hamilton joke for people that are interested. The next thing I would say is that there's a spectrum, right? Not every disabled person looks like me. It's just not how it works. And I think it's really easy when you want to be active and you want to be helpful and you want to be involved to go, okay, show me what they look like so I know who to stand up for. Show me what they look like so I know who to defend and who to correct and who's on the right side and who's on the wrong side and who do I need to be angry at. That is just an easy way to approach activism, but the truth of the matter is it does not work. Because you'll see by the end of this day, disability looks like me, disability looks like all of you. Believe me, you will meet a lot of disabled people in your life that you will never know. You'll meet a lot of disabled people in your life that are far more disabled than I. And frankly, if I didn't want you to know, I could sit in a regular chair and you would never know. It's a decision, an active decision to be seen and to be named and to be labeled and to do everything that comes with that, because I will not let ourselves be represented in a singularity. Your clapping is appreciated. You have to understand, I come from a slam poet scene. We're loud, y'all. Like you do not have to be quiet. The reason you see poets do this in the movies is so y'all can make noise and I can still hear myself talk. That's what the point of this is so y'all can be, so the crowd can say that was awesome and I can still think, because clapping is loud. So this brings me back to earlier what I said about me and energy, right? One of my biggest things that I try to tell able-bodied people all the time is most of the time, no matter what disability you have, it's about energy. It's about how much energy was I given and how am I going to use it. Go back to the obstacle course for a second. If everything you did in your house, if every time you had to go to the bathroom in your own house, you had to jump over the hurdle, even if you know exactly where it is, even if you've done it a million other times, if you have to do it every time you go to the bathroom and nobody else in your house has to do it, you're going to be tired. Right? That's going to take more out of you than it would just to do the activity of getting up and walking to the bathroom. Disability looks a little like that on the energy front. We all have different obstacles. They may all be in slightly different places. Some things may be more difficult for us than others, but energy is different day to day and needs to be controlled and monitored and thought about. The people I love that I work with are the people who are like, yeah, you can drive out and come to this meeting if you want to, or we can have a Skype meeting if it just so happens you can't get off your couch today. Right? Because some days, that is not the thing that I do. And some days when it's important and I have the energy and I can, I dress like this and I come talk to you all. But I also have a lot of privilege in the fact that I have a lot of help. My husband dresses me like this. My mother paints the makeup on my face. This is not a thing that I do because it would take 3 times as much energy and I just do not have the commitment. So now I'm going to drag you into the Disability Club a little bit and give you some lingo that we use. Any non-disabled identifying person in the group know what spoon theory is? Really? Not teaching spoon theory to the social workers? Tisk. All right, I'm about to give you a serious education in the lingo. Welcome to the club. So you're going to hear disabled people refer to ourselves as spoonies occasionally. Now, I didn't come up with this concept. It doesn't belong to me. If you want to be directed to the original post, I will gladly direct you. But I summarize it like this. Say you're in a restaurant with a disabled friend, and you say, tell me what it's like. Day to day, tell me what it's like. And she starts to tell you, and she says, well, sometimes I take medicine, and some days it's harder than others. And you say, no. Tell me down to the nitty-gritty what it actually looks like. And she says, okay. Grab that bundle of spoons from the table over there. And you pick it up. And she says, okay, now take me through your day. What tasks do you perform every day? And you say, I get out of bed and make breakfast. And you say, no. And she says, no. One at a time. Okay, I get out of bed and I put on clothes. Okay, give me 1 spoon. Okay, I go to the kitchen and I make breakfast. Okay, give me another spoon. And you do that and you go through your whole day and you get to the end of the day and you're deciding whether to shower or fix something for dinner and you have 1 spoon in your hand. What do? That's spoon theory, boys and girls, is some days your batteries are just smaller than everybody else's. It's not that you can't do what everybody else can do, it's just when it takes more energy and you start with less energy to begin with, you have to plan for it. You have to say, okay, I'm more tired at the end of the day, so I shower in the morning. Or I have a particularly difficult day when I have to exercise, so when I plan on going to the gym, I don't plan on doing anything else that day. And my husband asks me first thing in the morning every day, so how are the spoons today? So that we can plan our day based on how tired am I from the day before, how tired am I based on what am I eating and what am I doing, and who have I been talking to lately, because yes, some people are exhausted. Some phone calls are spoon killers, I promise you. And you understand that even if you're not part of the club. You understand that there are certain tasks that you will do and it's like, I have nothing left. I can't do it. That happens for us more often, but you know that feeling. You know that feeling, and if you can be aware of that and say, okay, I don't know what's costing you, so let me talk to you about what energy this is costing you, and where can we save you some, and what matters, what can we prioritize. Okay, now here comes the tough part. Ready? You know all the theory. I've told you about the house, and about the energy issues, and about how you know the inside of your house better than anyone else. So you spent a minute living in the metaphor of the disabled life. Got it? Ready? Great. Now here comes the tough part. Now here comes the work. Now here comes, what do we do now? Now we know all this information, now we're armed with all this information. Well, we're young college type people and we want to do something about it. I get it. I'm like that too. So here are some things I hope you'll focus on. One of my big, I don't know if you call it a pet peeve, but one of my big focuses in life is about disability, love, and sex. I teach body image, and people say that, and they're like, how do you teach body image? And I say to people all the time, people assume that you can't live in a disabled body and love it. How many movies have you seen where all the disabled people are unhappy until an able-bodied person shows up and loves them? Anybody else seen those movies? I mean, they're out there, come on. You've read the books, you've seen the movies, you know. we teach that a perfect body is a valued body, and that a disabled body is a broken body, and therefore not a lovable body. So how do I teach body image? As I say, people tell me I'm not supposed to like the skin I came in. If I can do it, there's no excuse. There is no excuse. So I suggest to you that if you can value yourselves, and if you can value other people based on the fact that they can love themselves, there's something to be said for that, and there's something to be said for the work that comes from that. There's something to be said for not assuming that a disabled person isn't a sexual being, or that they don't get married, or that they don't fall in love. I get that all the time, and that's why I make it my first remark to say that I'm married, because then people go, oh, wait, and yes, my husband is able-bodied, and yes, that is something that happens, and yes, sex is the thing that happens, and everybody can get over it now. Now, the next thing I'm going to say is going to make people go, huh? I'm getting somewhere, I promise. One of my biggest interactions with social workers and therapists and people of that nature is about employment, right? Because employers generally don't see a disabled person and think, I want to hire that person. There's something there. They think health insurance costs. They think absentee days. They think mentally inadequate. They think a million other things. I'm going to say to you that your job as people who are going to be in this world doing this kind of work, and as people who care about people with disabilities, is to say, maybe somebody would be better off looking at people with disabilities. Maybe the fact that we spend our whole lives adapting and innovating and changing and talking and knowing how to talk about our bodies is something employers could use. Maybe when we value that, when we say, hey, this is important and necessary and full of practical purpose, then we become employable. Then we stop being in a conversation about milking money off the government or whatever. I guarantee most people with disabilities would like to work and are told they can't, not the other way around. Now, this is going to sound like a no duh obvious, but one thing you need if you're going to have a job, you need transportation, right? You need a way to get from place to place. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about accessibility as a thing sitting still, right? Are there ramps? Are there bathrooms? Those are all very important things. But if we don't give people options of ways to get anywhere, what good is any of that? What good is all the work we're doing if we're not making space for transportation? And we need to talk about making it safe for disabled people to travel. I just finished an article, I write for a body image magazine, and I just finished an article talking about the dangers of disabled people on public transportation, because lots of disabled people take public transportation. A gentleman in DC died on a subway train because DC subway's plan to get disabled people out if there's a fire was to wait for the firefighters and let them carry them out. And he suffocated before they could get a firefighter down there. You haven't heard that, have you? You are people in this business wanting to represent people like us. And nobody's told you that people are dying on the trains. What does that tell you about the value of our bodies out in the world? What does that tell you about the value of us getting from place to place, about us getting to employment, about us interacting with the community, that nobody tells you when we're dead? It's kind of a problem. Another terrifying example that seems to keep happening is airplanes. I travel a lot for work. I've been all over the country. I do talks like this all over the place. And airplanes are a thing I do kind of a lot, or at least I used to. Until recently, a rash of incidences has happened where disabled people, I don't know if you know this, but when you go through security as a person who uses a wheelchair, they bring you through, they pat you down, you are removed from your wheelchair and placed in one that belongs to the airport, so that they can take yours apart, dust it for bomb dust, whatever the case may be, security shenanigans. And then they put you on the plane in their wheelchair, and yours is supposed to be waiting for you when you get back. Lately, that hasn't been what's happened. I can name 3 instances off the top of my head where people who paid for their airline tickets got on the plane and then went to get off and were told, "We don't know where your wheelchair is. It ended up in the baggage in some other state, in some other country, and we don't know what to do with you. Sorry." They don't feel obligated to find ways for us to get off. They don't feel obligated to find it and tell us where it is. So I've known 3 people who have crawled in front of planes full of people out of their seats, off of the planes, onto the tarmacs because they have no other way of escape. Even more recently, a gentleman who I personally know was taking a plane for work. He takes this exact flight probably 10 times a year. He does this flight all the time. He's big in business. It's not uncommon. And he gets on the flight, and suddenly there's a mass of flight attendants. And they're coming down the aisle at him all at once, and they say, "Excuse me, we've been told to remove you from the plane." And he says, "What?" And he paid for his ticket. This wasn't like some comp flight. This wasn't some favor he was being done. He paid for his ticket, and he's being told, "We need to remove you from this plane." And he said, "Well, why? This is my seat." And they said, "The pilot's not comfortable with you flying on this flight. We've been asked to have you removed." So because a pilot didn't want a disabled man on his flight, because he didn't want the responsibility, because he didn't want the risk, whatever it was, he got to decide that someone who paid for a ticket to be on that plane had to get off and was physically removed from said plane with no idea where his wheelchair was, with no idea where help was, removed from the plane. Another piece of the puzzle I'm currently working very hard on is the issue of education. I got very lucky. I went to a really good public school who took disabled people's education very seriously. Now, I think most people think that if you're disabled and you go to public school, you're in special ed. Right? That's what everybody thinks. I personally was what they call mainstream, which basically means they take you and they drop you into a regular class because they think you're smart enough to hold up your end of the bargain. But I was still entitled to extra time on tests because I write slow, to type my papers, to an aide to help me in bathrooms, small accommodations like that. Well, recently, Education Secretary Dobos has made it clear that she doesn't think those accommodations are necessary. That she believes that they're an undue burden on poor school districts and that states should be able to opt out of providing them if they wish. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. I want you to imagine that you have a disabled child who's like me, if they're lucky, who can hold up their academic end of the bargain, but needs assistance unbuttoning their pants in the bathroom, or needs a scribe to help write their papers, and all of a sudden the school says, "We don't have to do that. We don't have to give that to you anymore." What do you do then? Do you move? Do you try and scrape together the money for a private school? Or do you tell your child to push through and hope for the best? Nobody should have to make that decision. Nobody should say, "Let me pick up my whole family and move." Nobody should have to say, "Let me see if my child can survive not getting their ideal education and being held back in the academic pipeline more than they should have been because they don't have their accommodations." Nobody should say, "Let's see if we can scrape together our last pennies to go to private school." The entire purpose of public education is so everybody gets a crack at it. And when the head of public education wants to tell you otherwise, I expect that those of you who want to be social workers and activists and therapists and people who care about this community will say, "We don't think we're going to let that happen. We don't think that works for us. And you work for us. As a member of the government, you work for us." And that's enough of that. Thank you. I'm going to give you one more thing to think about before I summarize and close out. The other big concern I have for my community at the moment, now this could partly be because I'm a woman. I don't know if this is a concern that everybody has, but with the election of our current president, it's been made pretty clear that women are not his top priority. That the safety of women, that the sexual health of women, that the value of women's bodies are not something he's especially concerned about. Now I want you to imagine what that looks like when maybe your body's a little bit different. Maybe people assume that you can't consent or you won't. Maybe people assume that you can't run away. And imagine what the world looks like when the President of the United States is not only telling you that women don't matter, but then you're going, if somebody chases me down a street, where do I run? I want to tell you about an experience I had recently. I was at a conference very much like this one, and we were dancing till we fell over because there was a dance at the end of the conference, and we were having the time of our lives because it was a conference of poets, and we're all crazy people, and it was awesome. And I get to the end of the dance, and it's 3 a.m, and my husband's not with me because he didn't come to the conference because we couldn't both afford it. And the gentleman who's taking me in the elevator, because somebody has to operate the elevators, he turns and he looks at me, and with not a bit of distaste, not a bit of anything negative, looks at me and says, "Man, you are really well built. Has anybody told you that lately?" And my first thought was, well, thank you. And then my next thought was, oh shit. We're in an elevator alone together. It's 3 a.m. The President of the United States has just said that men are allowed to take women if they want them, and here we are. And what if this man who hasn't done anything to me but had a sparkle in his eye suddenly decides that that wasn't enough? What if he decides that he wants me and I can't say no? What if he decides that he wants me and I can't scream because it's 3 o'clock in the morning and we're in an elevator and no one will hear us? Now this story doesn't end with some great tragedy. I came out of it fine. I spent the rest of the week with that man. He was lovely. But understand that. Understand that fear is something that exists, and that it is something that we carry around, and it is something that we shouldn't have to. And understand that that is part of the work you're doing, is to say, yes, that fear is real, yes, it's there, and to do the work to make it survivable until other people value our bodies as much as you do, because obviously they don't. Now, I feel like I'm running over my time, so I'm going to close out with a summary and give you all a chance to ask me anything you want, because I believe in open spectrum question, and you literally can't embarrass me. I used to wear a vibrator around my neck. You cannot embarrass me. Yes, I tell people that, because then they're like, oh, she really doesn't care. No, she really doesn't care. What did I want you to leave the house with? You've lived in this house for a minute, and you've lived inside the idea of disability for a minute, and I'm going to leave you with what I want you to remember. Innovation is the name of the game. Inventiveness is the name of the game. We were born into these bodies to make change and to show change and to show that change is possible, and that we have to adapt, and we do. And we should be treated first and foremost as people who can always adapt. We're the experts on ourselves. No matter how much work you do, no matter how many books you read, no matter how many of these talks you hear, and I'm so glad you do all those things, I'm not trying to discourage you. Remember that you wouldn't want anybody else telling you how to live in your body. Be the experts in standing up for somebody else for how they want to live in theirs. It's a spectrum, right? Not every disabled body looks like me. You're going to see all kinds of disabled bodies today, and you're going to see all kinds of disabled bodies in your life, and some of them you may not even know. It changes day to day. Just like anybody else, we have good days and bad days, we fall down, we get colds. Life is like that. And energy is everything. Our batteries are a little bit smaller sometimes, our output is different, we spend different amounts of energy on different things, and valuing that energy and saying whatever you can do with it today is what counts, is the most that I think we can ask. Now, does anybody have a question, a comment, a thought, anything they want to share with me before I scamper off and take my leave? Yes, absolutely. He wanted to know if I think the reason why sexual crimes against the disabled are not statistically reported is because of that fear that we talked about earlier. And I think that's the reason a lot of people don't report disabled or otherwise, right, is there's something to be said when you blame the victim. There's something to be said about her skirt was too short, she shouldn't have been walking alone, she could have said no. Those things exist for everybody, and that fear of being judged and that fear of further danger, I think that exists for everybody. But I think there's also a couple of disability-specific issues. One, I think people tend to not believe us, because if you're not a sexual being, then why would somebody do that to you? 2, not everybody has communication skills. Some disabled people don't speak. Some disabled people have a hard time communicating. Some can't transport themselves to go to the police if they wanted to, right? So there's that. I think it's also a factor to consider that if people act like you're being done a favor. That sounds terrible, but the reality of the situation is if the culture says you're not sexually desirable, then somebody who wants you, even if they take you, is doing you a favor because you're special and I wanted you and aren't you glad? And shouldn't we all be glad to be one? That was a brave first question. On the front about travel and personal experiences, the only thing I can say is everybody who's been on a plane can tell you security is very invasive. Having somebody touch you like that is uncomfortable for everybody, I'd venture to say. And that because disability a lot of times is viewed as a, how shall I phrase it, inconvenience, I think people tend to be rougher with us and a little, so I luckily have not experienced a lot of that safety fear that I talked about in the direct sense like that, but I do know that anytime I've traveled in my life and had to go through airport security and that kind of thing, there's only one way to do it, and if I wasn't able to do it, I don't know what would happen, because when you go through security like that, they say, can you stand? Now my answer has always been yes, so I don't know what happens if you say no. I genuinely do not know. But when the answer is yes, hold on, I'm gonna do a crazy thing and freak everybody out for a second. I can tell some people know what I'm about to do. I can feel the eyeballs. Hold on, here, hold this. I can yell, it's fine. So I can do this, right? Hold on, feet on the floor in slippery shoes. So I can do this. So what they do in situations like this is they take somebody like me and they shove you up against the table. Your hands are out on the table like this, and they pat you down top to bottom, and they pat you down top to bottom, and you're either clear or you're not. I don't know what happens if the answer to that is no.